Released early from prison, Olivia saved a little orphan girl who had run away from the orphanage from a pack of enraged dogs. The girl begged her to take her to her father, and the woman agreed. But the moment she brought her to the address, she froze in the doorway, unable to take even one step. Because the owner of that house turned out to be the man she hated more than anyone else in the world. But she had no idea what terrible truth would be revealed the very next day. Hello, dear friends. Before we continue, write in the comments where you're watching us from and make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Enjoy listening. The iron bolt slammed shut behind her. Olivia didn't flinch. In 4 years in prison, she had trained herself not to react to sharp sounds. In there, you couldn't flinch. They saw it as weakness, and the weak were chewed up and spit out, left as nothing but an empty shell. She stood on the asphalt and looked at the road disappearing into the gray autumn haze. October of 2001 had turned out raw and miserable. The wind, carrying the smell of rotting leaves and exhaust fumes, hurled a handful of icy sleet into her face. Olivia took a deep breath. Harsh, unpleasant, but hers. The first breath of a person who no longer needed permission to lift her eyes to the sky. She was wearing a coat, gray, one size too big, and an old wool scarf that had somehow survived from her former life. In her hands was a worn-out bag, a change of underwear, a bar of soap, her release papers, and a few crumpled bills she had earned in the prison sewing shop. "What are you standing there for?" a guard's raspy voice called out from the gatehouse. "The bus comes in 20 minutes. The next one's not till tonight." Olivia nodded silently, adjusted the strap on her shoulder, and stepped forward. Her legs in those heavy boots felt like they weren't hers. As she walked toward the bus stop, memory threw her an image from '96. Andrew laughing, his head tipped back, his hands steady on the steering wheel, the car smelling like tangerines. They were driving to buy a couch. Andrew had said then, "Olivia, you'll see, this is going to be our year. We're finally going to live." He was wrong. That year became their end. Andrew was buried in January 1997, and Olivia, stunned by grief and injustice, was sent behind bars. For a murder she did not commit. For the wheel they had strapped her to after she was already drunk. After forcing half a bottle of cheap vodka down her throat to stage the crash. The bus stop was a rusted shelter with a few people standing beneath it. They let their indifferent eyes slide over Olivia and turned away. No one knew that under that gray coat beat a heart that had forgotten how to believe. An old rattling bus pulled up, belching a cloud of bluish smoke. Olivia got on last, handed the driver her crumpled bills, and sat by the window. Outside, the glass-drifted fields dusted with the first snow, blackened crooked fences. The country was changing. Bright billboards promised a beautiful life she would never have. New shiny cars sped past the bus, predatory and arrogant. She got back to the city around lunchtime. She got off at the station and was instantly deafened by the noise. Music blasted from kiosks. People hurried, shoved, cursed. Life was boiling and surging. And in that cauldron, there was no place for Olivia. She no longer had an apartment. The place had been taken for her husband's debts, debts that had supposedly surfaced after his death, but had really been seized by the same people who had ruined her life. She had no family left either. Her mother had died 6 months after the sentence. Olivia hadn't even been able to say goodbye. "Pancakes! Hot pancakes!" a rosy-cheeked woman shouted from a stand. Olivia's stomach tightened traitorously. The last time she had eaten was yesterday evening. She had enough money for either food or a ticket to the neighboring town where a former co-worker lived, the only person who had sent her even a single postcard in all those years. "With jam, please," Olivia asked softly. Her voice came out hoarse, as if it had rusted from too much silence. She stepped over to the station wall and, burning her fingers, took a bite. The taste felt divine. She chewed slowly, watching the people passing by. Happy, worried, angry, cheerful. All of them had homes, families, plans for the evening. She had only a half-eaten pancake and the little money left in her pocket. By evening, the city was swallowed by lead-colored twilight. Streetlights came on every other one, casting trembling shadows across the wet asphalt. Olivia had already missed the train. Spending the night at the station was dangerous. She wandered away from downtown, and her feet led her on their own to an old city park that faded into an abandoned construction site. It was quiet there, smelling of dampness and cold. Olivia found a more or less dry bench under an oak tree, spread out a newspaper she had picked up along the way, and sat down with her legs tucked under her. "It's fine," she thought. "I'll make it through one night. I just can't fall asleep too hard." She closed her eyes, but instead of Andrew's face, the investigator's mug kept rising before her inner vision, the one who had smirked and said, "Sign it, idiot. They'll cut your sentence. Nobody's going to believe you anyway." Suddenly, the silence of the park was ripped apart by a piercing child's scream. Olivia's eyes flew open at once. The sound came again, a child's voice full of terror. "Go away! Get back!" And right after, it came a low, guttural growl that sent a chill racing down her spine. Olivia jumped up. Her exhaustion vanished in an instant. Her body remembered an old habit. Act first, think later. She ran toward the sound, pushing through bushes that clawed at her coat. In a small clearing lit by the dull glow of a distant street lamp, she saw a sight that made her breath catch. Pressed back against the trunk of a linden tree stood a little girl, maybe 8 years old. Her thin jacket was hanging open, her beret was crooked, and in her hands she held a stick she was swinging clumsily in front of her. At her feet trembled a tiny red puppy. They were surrounded by a pack of 5 or 6 stray dogs, skinny with burning hungry eyes. The leader, a large dog with a torn ear, was already crouching low, getting ready to spring. "Go away!" the girl cried, but her voice broke into sobs. "Stand down!" Olivia's voice wasn't loud, but there was so much steel in it that the air itself seemed to ring. The dogs froze. Olivia walked straight at the pack, not waving her arms, not looking for a stick, just walking. In prison, she had seen beasts worse than these, 2-legged ones who would rip your throat out over a pack of cigarettes. She had learned to look them in the eyes in a way that made them look away first. When she came right up to the leader, she looked straight into his black pupils. He saw not a drop of fear in her eyes, only emptiness and cold determination. Animals sense that better than people do. "Get out," she said quietly, almost in a whisper. "I'll kill you." The dog shifted his paws, snapped his teeth at the empty air, and backed away with his tail tucked. The pack scattered, dissolving into the darkness. Only when the last shadow vanished did Olivia let out a breath. Her knees started trembling traitorously, but she forced herself to stay upright. The girl slid down the trunk, clutching the puppy to her chest. She wasn't crying, only her shoulders shook in tiny spasms. "Are you okay?" Olivia crouched down, trying to make her voice gentler. The girl lifted her head. Huge gray eyes in a dirty little face looked at her with a seriousness no child should have. "They wanted to eat, buddy," she whispered. "But they didn't," Olivia said with a faint smile, though everything inside her was still pounding. "You did good. You didn't leave him. What's your name?" "Kate. And yours?" "Aunt Olivia." "Where did you come from, Kate? It's dark already. It's late." The girl dropped her eyes and started picking at a button hanging by a single thread. "I don't have anybody. I'm from the orphanage. I ran away." Olivia looked at the child more carefully. Poor clothes, orphanage issue. Worn-out shoes, tights full of snags. "So you ran away. And where to?" "Home. To my real home where I used to live, before they found me on the street." She faltered and sniffled. Olivia sighed. Children often made up fairy tales about parents and big houses to protect themselves from the gray reality of the orphanage. She dug in her pocket and pulled out half a pancake she had been saving for the morning. "Here, eat. It's cold already." The girl's eyes lit up. She grabbed the pancake, broke it in half, and immediately shoved one piece to the puppy. He swallowed it whole without chewing and licked her fingers gratefully. Kate herself ate greedily, choking on crumbs. Olivia felt that pain physically. It took her back to her first months in prison. "Cold?" Olivia asked, taking off her scarf. She wrapped it around the girl. The child smelled like dust and something faintly homey. "You can't stay here, Kate. We'll have to find the police." "No!" Kate clutched at her coat with unexpected strength. "Please don't give me back to them. They'll kill Buddy. They said they'd drown him. That's why I ran away." The tears broke through and rolled down her dirty cheeks, leaving pale tracks behind. "Easy, easy," Olivia said, awkwardly stroking her tangled hair. "Nobody's drowning anybody. I won't let them." She didn't even understand what she was saying. She didn't have a roof over her own head. If a patrol found them, Olivia could be accused of kidnapping. With her release papers, that was a ticket straight back behind bars. "I know the address," Kate said suddenly, no longer crying. She looked at Olivia with a clear, certain gaze. "I remembered today when I was sleeping. I dreamed about a big clock and beautiful gates with patterns on them. I remembered the street, Pine Street, House 42. It's in Creekwood. My daddy lives there." Olivia frowned. She knew Creekwood. Back in the 90s, it had been the kind of place ordinary people weren't allowed into. Bankers, politicians, high fences, security, purebred, vicious dogs. "Kate, are you sure? Maybe you saw it in a movie?" "No," the girl repeated firmly. "I remember. My daddy's there. He lost me, and he's waiting." Something in the child's voice made Olivia fall silent. It wasn't a spoiled whim, but a quiet certainty. The kind only children have, before they forget how to believe in miracles. Olivia looked up at the dark sky, where a lone star was pushing through the clouds. Then she looked back at the girl clutching the red puppy to her chest. "I've officially lost my mind," she thought. "All right," she said out loud, rising to her feet. "Get up, Kate. Let's go find your house on 42. But if there's nobody there or they chase us off, we go to the police. Deal?" "Deal!" Kate beamed and held out her small, cold hand. Olivia took it. The warmth of the child's palm burned against her rough, wind-chapped skin. Something stirred deep in her chest, beneath the layers of pain and resentment, as if a mechanism that had stopped long ago suddenly made one timid, creaking turn. They walked out of the park. A strange trio, a former convict, a runaway orphan, and a mutt puppy. Ahead of them waited the night, a rich neighborhood that wasn't theirs, and a past that still hadn't finished settling its scores. They didn't have money for a cab, but Olivia raised her hand at an intersection anyway. 2 cars sped past, splashing them with mud, but then an old battered sedan slowed down. The driver, a guy around 25 with sharp, watchful eyes, rolled down the window. The car smelled like cheap tobacco. "Where to?" he asked, looking over their little group. "Creekwood," Olivia answered shortly. The guy whistled. "That's pretty far. What's with the dog?" "The dog's with us. We don't have much money, son. We've got $20. Will you take us?" He grunted, looked at the shivering Kate, at the puppy tucked under her jacket, and waved his hand. "Get in. I'm driving alone anyway." Olivia settled Kate into the back seat and got in beside her. The car pulled away. Outside the window stretched sleeping neighborhoods, flickering with the occasional light in a window. "And who exactly are you going there to see?" the driver kept asking, looking at them in the rearview mirror. "Visiting someone?" Olivia cut him off, making it clear the conversation was over. She closed her eyes, and the steady clatter of the wheels suddenly worked like hypnosis. Reality began to blur. October. 1996. "Olivia, come on, smile," Andrew said, covering her hand with his. A warm, steady hand. They were driving down a country highway, Golden Fall blazing all around them. "Andrew, I feel uneasy for some reason. Maybe we shouldn't go out to the lake house today." "Oh, stop, scaredy cat," he laughed. "Everything's going to be fine. We're together, aren't we?" Next to him, her fears had always seemed foolish. He was a simple engineer, honestly working in that crazy time while everyone around them was hustling whatever they could. They didn't have much, counted every penny until payday, but they were happy with that quiet kind of happiness money could never buy. "Look, a rainbow!" Andrew pointed ahead. Olivia leaned toward the windshield, and in that instant the world turned upside down. Around the curve, in the oncoming lane, a huge black Cherokee came flying at them, passing a semi, brazen as a tank. "Andrew!" she screamed. He jerked the wheel hard to the right. The car skidded on the wet leaves. The impact was horrifying. The screech of metal, the crash of glass, and darkness. She came to because of a sharp smell and the sound of strangers' voices. Her head was splitting apart. Beside her lay Andrew, his head thrown back at an unnatural angle. A thin red stream was running from his temple. "Andrew!" she rasped, trying to reach for him. The door flew open and rough hands yanked her outside. 3 men stood over her, leather jackets, gold chains. A little farther away, a Jeep with a smashed headlight was smoking. "The bald guy's obviously not gonna make it," one of them said, spitting. "The woman's alive, that's a problem." The second one, tall, with a shaved skull and a scar running across his whole cheek, crouched in front of Olivia. His eyes were empty. "Cops are on the way. Our guy in the department will handle it. We do it the usual way." The bald one pulled out a bottle of whiskey. The other 2 grabbed Olivia by the arms and twisted them behind her back. She screamed, struggled, but they were stronger. The neck of the bottle slammed painfully against her teeth. Burning liquid poured down her throat. Olivia choked, coughed, tried to spit it out. They pinched her nose shut. She had no choice but to swallow. "Give her more, just to be safe. She was driving, drunk, lost control of the car. Got it?" When the bottle was half empty, they threw Olivia into the driver's seat. "Andrew," she whispered, staring at her husband's motionless profile. "Help him. Call an ambulance." "No helping him now," the bald one said indifferently, wiping his hands. "And you sit quiet. You make one sound about us, we'll dig your mother out of the ground. We found your address and your passport." The world spun in circles. The last thing she saw before slipping into darkness was a police car pulling up, and the bald man shaking hands like an old buddy with the officer who stepped out. "We're here!" The driver's voice yanked her out of the nightmare. Olivia flinched and opened her eyes. Her heart was pounding in her throat. Her mouth was full of the phantom taste of alcohol and blood. She ran a hand over her face, cold sweat. "What's wrong with you? You're white as a sheet," the guy smirked. "Car sick," she answered hoarsely. They were standing in front of a tall brick wall, wrought iron gates topped with spikes, surveillance cameras, a guard booth. Everything about the place said that the people who lived here were very afraid of the outside world. "Thank you," Olivia said, holding out the money to the driver. "Forget it. Keep it," the driver said suddenly, looking at the sleeping Kate. "Buy the little one some chocolate. I've got a daughter about her age myself." He hit the gas and drove off, leaving them alone in front of the closed gates. The girl rubbed her eyes sleepily, clutching the puppy. "Are we here? Is this it?" Olivia looked at the sign. "Creekwood. Private property. No trespassing. Looks like it." "All right, lead the way." They walked up to the guard booth. A huge security guard in camouflage stepped out, a baton hanging from his belt. "Stop right there. Who are you? What do you want?" "We're here to see the owner of House 42, Olivia said firmly, meeting his eyes with that special look of hers. The guard was caught off guard. He was used to people either sucking up to him or threatening him. But this, a woman in a coat with a child and a dog, looking at him like a prosecutor. "You mean Palmer?" he snorted. "Sure. He's probably just sitting there with tea waiting for you. Get lost before we let the dogs loose." Then Kate suddenly stepped forward. Small, skinny. But there was something in the way she held herself that made the guard go quiet. Some kind of natural breeding you couldn't hide under ragged clothes. "Call my daddy," she said clearly. "Tell him Kate is here." The guard blinked and shifted his gaze to Olivia. Everyone in Creekwood knew Palmer's story. 4 years ago, his daughter had disappeared, and since then he had lived like a recluse. "But she disappeared a long time ago." "I was found," Kate answered simply. The guard scratched the back of his head. This was clearly way outside protocol. "Fine," he muttered, stepping back into the booth. "I'll call, but if this is some kind of joke, you'll regret it." Olivia could hear him mumbling into the phone. Then there was silence. One long, heavy minute. "Open the gate!" A voice suddenly roared over the speaker. Not the guard's voice, the growl of a wounded beast. With a heavy groan, the gates began to swing open. House 42 turned out to be a real castle of red brick. Tall towers, pointed windows, a perfectly kept lawn, emerald green even in October. Lanterns burned along the driveway. A man was standing on the front steps. Olivia slowed down. Even from 50 yards away, she could feel the wave of tension coming off him. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a coat thrown over him, leaning on a cane, staring into the dark. "Daddy!" Kate shouted. The man staggered. The cane slipped from his hand and hit the steps with a dull knock. The girl ran toward him. Her little legs flashed over the stone path, the puppy rolling after her like a red ball of fur. The man dropped to his knees right there on the cold stone and threw his arms open. Kate crashed into him at full speed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Daddy, I came back. I ran away from the mean dogs." Olivia stopped in the shadow of a large chestnut tree. She felt like an outsider at this celebration of resurrection. There had never been resurrections in her life. The man was crying. This huge, strong man was openly sobbing, burying his face in his daughter's dirty little jacket, kissing her hands, her hair, her face. "Alive, my God! Alive, Katie!" The puppy jumped around them whining, trying to lick his nose. Olivia watched them, and a bitter wave rose in her chest. Why do some people get a second chance, while others have the last thing taken from them? Suddenly, the man lifted his head. His face, wet with tears, tightened. He looked over his daughter's head, straight into the darkness where Olivia was standing. "Who's there? Step into the light." Olivia stepped out of the shadows. The lantern light fell across her tired face and gray coat. "That's Aunt Olivia," Kate shouted. "She saved me. She chased the dogs away. She's nice, Daddy." The man slowly rose from his knees, holding his daughter's hand. His steel-gray eyes narrowed. He was scanning the stranger. Cheap clothes, a hunted but proud look, the mark of grief that had been lived through and survived. "So you saved her," he said slowly. "Then come inside, Aunt Olivia." Olivia walked up the steps. As she passed him, their eyes met for just a second, and it hit her like an electric shock. The same pain lived in his eyes that lived in hers. But there was something else there too, something vague, elusive, almost like recognition. Not his face. She had never seen him before. But his gaze held a strange depth, as if he were looking at her with eyes that weren't entirely his own. "My name is Victor," he said, letting her go ahead of him. "If you're telling the truth and you really saved my daughter, I'll reward you. But if this is some kind of act—" He didn't finish, but Olivia understood. "I don't need a reward," she answered quietly. "Just give me some water and let me spend the night somewhere warm. I'll leave in the morning." Victor raised an eyebrow in surprise but said nothing. In the huge front hall, a tall grandfather clock stood in the corner, the very one from Kate's dream. Tick-tock, tick-tock, measuring out the time of a new life. Olivia saw her reflection in the large mirror beside Victor, a gray mouse and the master of this castle. But in the mirror, they looked strangely alike, two wrecks from the same shipwreck, washed up on the same shore. The house smelled of wax, expensive leather, and frozen time. To Olivia, used to the smell of bleach and damp walls, that scent felt almost suffocating. Victor gave orders in short, clipped phrases. A plump woman in a starched apron appeared. Margaret. She threw up her hands at the sight of dirty little Kate, fussed and gasped, but under the harsh look from her employer, she immediately led the girl away to be washed and fed. They allowed the puppy to stay in the entryway on a mat. "You need to clean up too," Victor said without looking at Olivia. "Margaret will show you the guest room. We'll find clothes from my late wife's things. You're about the same size." Pride stabbed under Olivia's ribs, but she said nothing. Pride wouldn't feed her, and she hadn't seen hot water in 4 years. The bathroom was half the size of a prison cell. Snow-white tile, gold-plated faucets, fluffy towels. Olivia turned the water on. A stream of hot water poured out. She undressed, trying not to look in the mirror. She was afraid to see what those years had done to her. When she lowered herself into the hot water, her body answered with a sweet, aching pain. Every muscle relaxed, as if a knot pulled tight for years were finally coming undone. Olivia took a bar of lavender soap and scrubbed her skin furiously until it turned red. She wanted to wash off more than dirt. She wanted to wash off the whole sticky gray layer of the past, the smell of prison itself. She came out an hour later. A severe wool dress was lying on the bed. It fit perfectly, only a little loose in the shoulders. Olivia had lost a lot of weight. After combing out her wet hair, she finally looked into the mirror. A stranger looked back at her with hollowed eyes full of ancient exhaustion, but still beautiful. With that thin, tragic kind of beauty the years could not kill. When she came downstairs, she found Victor in the dining room. The long table for 12 looked like an airstrip. Victor sat at the head before an untouched dinner. Kate wasn't there. She had gotten tired and fallen asleep. "Sit down. You must be hungry." A plate with a steaming steak and vegetables was set in front of Olivia. Her stomach clenched in a spasm, but she forced herself to take the fork slowly, with dignity. She would not throw herself at the food like an animal. They ate in silence. Victor watched her closely, but not rudely. All evening he had been tormented by a strange feeling, his heart beating like a butterfly trapped in a jar. The doctors said it was the after effects of surgery, stress. He had grown used to living with the feeling that a bomb was ticking in his chest. But now, when this woman had walked in and sat beside him, when the faint scent of lavender soap and wet hair reached him, the butterfly went still. His heart started beating evenly, powerfully. Thump, 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 as if it had recognized some familiar rhythm. Victor set down his fork and rubbed his chest. Strange. "So what were you in for, Olivia?" he asked suddenly. She froze with a piece of bread in her hand, then slowly set it back down. "You checked up on me?" "Not yet. But I'm not an idiot. The way you carry yourself, that look in your eyes, you can spot prison right away." Olivia straightened her back. "Murder," she said, looking straight at the bridge of his nose. "Manslaughter. I was drunk behind the wheel, crashed into a guardrail. My husband died. I lived." Victor didn't recoil. He only narrowed his eyes. Suspicion and sympathy were fighting in them. "You don't look like a drinker, and you don't look like a killer. You have a musician's hands." Olivia pulled her hands under the table. "Looks can be deceiving. Just like you don't look like a man who spent 4 years not searching for his daughter. A blow below the belt. Victor's face darkened, his cheekbones turning to stone. I searched. I tore up the earth, went through every hospital, every orphanage. But the people who did this knew how to cover their tracks. He stood abruptly and downed his water in one swallow. Thank you for bringing Kate back. You can stay here as long as you need. A room, food, clothes, all on me. He turned and limped out of the dining room. Olivia was left alone. Her appetite was gone. She wandered through the first floor and ended up in the library, a huge room with a fireplace, floor-to-ceiling dark oak shelves, the smell of old paper and tobacco, perfect order on the massive desk. The walls were covered with photographs in formal frames. Victor with the mayor, Victor at the opening of a factory, Victor on a hunting trip. He looked the same in all of them, hard, confident, cold-eyed. But one photograph on the mantel caught her attention. It was in color, amateur, slightly faded. Victor was standing against the backdrop of an autumn forest, smiling broadly, with a smile Olivia had never seen on him. In his arms was a very little Kate, and behind him, gleaming with black lacquer, stood a car, a huge black Grand Cherokee. Olivia stepped closer. The floor seemed to slide out from under her feet. She knew that car, that grille that looked like the snarl of a beast. The license plate was only partly visible, splattered with mud, but the digits 77 and one of the series letters had been burned into her memory forever. On that terrible day, 1 second before the crash, those numbers had danced before her eyes. It was the same car. Olivia's hand trembled. She grabbed the mantel to keep from falling. A roar filled her head. So it was him. This benefactor, this suffering father, his car had killed Andrew and sent her to prison. A rich man causes a crash so he won't go to jail himself, frames the surviving wife of the victim, buys off police and judges, and goes on living until the boomerang of fate comes back and strikes him too. Like the photo? Olivia spun around sharply. Victor was standing in the doorway in a house sweater. He looked awful. Face gray, dark shadows under his eyes, one hand pressed to his chest out of habit. "Nice car," she said, and her own voice sounded foreign to her. "Yours?" Victor walked over to the fireplace. His expression softened. "Yes, it was my pride and joy. Back in '96, there were only 3 like it in the whole city." "And where is it now?" Victor's face clouded over. "Gone. Stolen. On that very day when—" He broke off, exhaled heavily, and rubbed the left side of his chest. "The day my life split into before and after, October of '96. It was stolen with the papers inside." Olivia went still. A lie or the truth? "Did you file a police report?" Victor gave a bitter smile. "I was practically the police report. I was almost killed that day. They threw me out of the car while it was moving in the woods. I crawled 3 miles to the highway. They never found the car. The case got buried." He looked at Olivia. "Why are you asking? Do you know that vehicle?" Her heart was pounding so hard the blows echoed in her temples. He's lying. Lying smoothly, the way men like him do. But alongside the hatred, a worm of doubt stirred inside her. The pain in his voice had sounded too real, and that hand-to-the-heart motion. "No," she lied, looking him straight in the eye. "Just a beautiful car." Victor lowered himself wearily into an armchair by the fireplace. "I'm not the master of life, Olivia. First my health was taken from me, then my daughter, and now that Katie is back, I'm afraid this is all a dream." He lifted his eyes to her. "You know, my heart is bad. It's a donor heart. Sometimes it aches like it's longing for someone. But today, when you came, it went quiet. It's beating calmly like it's home." A chill ran down Olivia's spine. Not from fear, from something she couldn't explain. "A donor heart?" she repeated in a whisper. I had the surgery in '97 in January. Just barely in time. They said it was a miracle a donor was found. A young guy didn't survive after a crash. January of '97. Andrew died in intensive care on January 7th. Christmas. Olivia remembered that day as if it had been yesterday. The warden had come to her cell and said dryly, "You're a widow now." The air in the room thickened. Olivia stared at Victor's broad chest beneath the thin wool of his sweater. Under those ribs, a living heart was beating. "I'm going," she said abruptly, turning away. She had to leave immediately, or she would scream. "Good night, Olivia, and thank you." She ran out into the hallway, leaned her back against the cool wall, and slid down to the floor. She was shaking. January, the crash, the black Jeep. All the threads were pulling into one knot, and that knot was tightening around her throat. She was living in her enemy's house, eating the bread of the man whose car had killed her husband. But inside that enemy's chest was a heart that grew calm when she was near. Olivia covered her face with her hands. She had to know the truth. And if Victor was guilty, she wouldn't care about his money or about Katie. She would make him pay. Morning in the Palmer house began not with sunlight, but with a heavy gray sky pressed right down onto the roof. Rain drummed against the tall, pointed windows. Olivia had not slept all night. She had lain in a stranger's bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence. In it, she imagined Andrew's footsteps, the screech of brakes, and that terrible sound of impact. The thought that she was under the same roof as a killer burned through her from the inside. She needed to leave, right now while the house was still asleep. But something held her back. In the next room, through the half-open door, Kate was sleeping, curled up in a ball, hugging a pillow. The red puppy was snoring softly on the rug, twitching his paws in his sleep. Leaving them behind felt like a betrayal worse than staying in the house of her enemy. Olivia went downstairs to the living room. In the corner, covered with a velvet cloth, stood a grand piano. She approached it like an old friend she hadn't seen in 1,000 years. She pulled back the heavy cover. The black lacquer gleamed, reflecting the gloomy morning. Becker, an old noble instrument. Olivia sat down on the bench. 4 years had passed since she had touched piano keys. Would her fingers remember? She carefully pressed one key. The sound drifted through the room, pure, deep, velvety. D minor, Andrew's favorite key. He had always asked her to play a Chopin nocturne when he came home tired from work. "It heals the soul," he used to say, closing his eyes. Olivia closed her eyes and let her hands find their own way. The music began to pour out, uncertain at first, stumbling, but with every measure her fingers remembered, came alive. She was playing a requiem for her former life. In that music was the pain of prison bunks, the cold of loneliness, and the tenderness she still carried for the husband who had been taken from her. "Beautiful!" Olivia cut the music off sharply. Victor was standing in the doorway. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you," Olivia said dryly, closing the piano lid. "You didn't wake me. I wasn't asleep. My heart acts up when the weather changes." He walked into the room, leaning heavily on his cane. Today, he didn't look like an all-powerful businessman, but like a tired man trapped in the body of a 50-year-old. "Are you a professional?" he asked, nodding toward the piano. "In another life, I was a music teacher." "My wife played too," Victor said, lowering himself into an armchair and closing his eyes. "Katie loved listening." "I thought music in this house died with them." Olivia stood up. "I need to leave, Victor. I can't stay here." "Why?" He opened his eyes. Genuine alarm was moving in them. "Did someone here hurt you?" "No. It's just that our worlds collided in too painful a way." Victor was about to answer, but suddenly his face twisted with pain. He gasped for air, his fingers digging into the armrest until they turned white. "The pills," he rasped. "On the desk, in my office." Olivia rushed into the office, grabbed the bottle of medication and a glass of water. When she came back, Victor had slumped sideways in the chair, fumbling at his shirt collar. His lips had turned blue. "Drink." She held the glass up to him, his teeth knocking against it. He swallowed the capsule and threw his head back, breathing hard. Olivia took hold of his cold wrist. His pulse was uneven, erratic. And then her eyes dropped to his chest. The top buttons of his shirt were undone. Down the center of his chest ran a long, ugly scar. Pink, the mark of his chest having been split open. Her hand moved on its own. Olivia placed her palm on Victor's chest, right over the scar. There, under the skin, it was beating. Thump, thump, thump. The rhythm was evening out. Olivia froze, not even breathing. It felt to her like she was sensing more than just the beating of muscle. She felt warmth, familiar, long-forgotten warmth, the warmth that had once kept her warm at night. "Andrew?" she asked silently. The heart answered with one powerful, steady thump. Victor opened his eyes. He was looking up at her without authority, without pride, only surprise and a childlike confusion. "It's better," he whispered. "The second you touched me, it let go." Olivia jerked her hand away. "You need to call a doctor." "No doctors. These are attacks. They happen when I remember." "Remember what?" she asked sharply. The moment was perfect. He was weak, exposed. "That day, 1996. Victor nodded, still breathing hard. "I told you the car was stolen, but I didn't tell you everything." Olivia gripped the back of the chair. "Then tell me." "I was driving Kate home from daycare. I turned onto the bypass road. I didn't notice when a car pulled up behind me. 3 men got out wearing masks, but I remember one man's eyes, empty, like a dead fish, and a scar on his cheek. He touched his temple, where an old white line showed beneath his gray hair. They hit me and I blacked out. I woke up in the woods. It was dark, cold. I crawled to the highway, and when I finally got to people, the car was gone, Katie was gone." He raised his eyes to Olivia, full of tears. "I thought they had killed her. I lived with that for 4 years, and my heart couldn't take it. Massive heart attack. The doctors kept me on machines until a donor was found." Olivia listened, and every word fell into her soul like a heavy stone, breaking down the wall of hatred. The bald man with the scar. She remembered him. He was the one who had poured vodka down her throat. He was the one who had laughed while Andrew was dying. So Victor hadn't lied. He had been thrown out before the crash, and those men, having stolen the Jeep with a child in the back seat, had driven down the highway and killed Andrew. The puzzle had come together, but that only made it more terrifying. "The bald man," Olivia whispered. "Tall, wiry, scar across the whole left cheek." Victor jolted upright. Steel flashed in his eyes. "How do you know about the left cheek? I never said left." Olivia realized there was no point in backing down. "Because I saw him, October 5th, 1996. She spoke quietly, but every word rang in the silence. "They crashed into us on the highway in your Jeep. My Andrew was unconscious. They got out of the vehicle, all 3 of them. They poured vodka down my throat so they could pin everything on me." Victor slowly rose to his feet, forgetting about his cane. His face turned white as chalk. "My God." "So it was you? The woman they wrote about in the papers?" "Yes. And I served time for them, and for you too, because it was your car." Victor came right up to her. He looked at her with horror and something close to reverent awe. "And the heart," his voice dropped to a whisper. "Your husband, when did he die?" "The crash was on October 5th. He died in intensive care on January 7th, right after New Year's." "January 7th, Victor repeated. His hand went to his chest. "My transplant was done on the 8th in the morning. They told me the donor had died the day before." A silence fell over the room so deep, it felt like the glass might shatter from it. Two people stood facing each other, bound by an invisible thread woven from blood, death, and life. In Victor's chest beat Andrew's heart, the heart of a man he had never known, but whose death had given him life and brought his widow to him. "It's him," Olivia said, reaching out to touch his chest. The tears she had held back for 4 years came pouring from her eyes. "It's Andrew. He came back to me." Victor covered her hand with his. His hand was warm. "Forgive me," he whispered. "Forgive me for living while you suffered. I'll find them, Olivia. I swear on this heart. I'll find every last one of them." At that moment, the door flew open. Sleepy Kate stood in the doorway in bunny pajamas, rubbing one eye with her little fist. "Daddy, Aunt Olivia, why are you crying? Buddy wants food." Olivia quickly wiped away her tears. Victor took a deep breath. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just got something in my eye." Kate looked at her father, then at Olivia. "I remembered that man," she said suddenly, wrinkling her little nose. "What man?" Victor tensed. "The bald one. The one who took me away in the car. He yelled at me, and when we crashed, he told the other guy, 'Leave the girl in the woods, we need to run.' And then I ran. I kept running and running, hit my head and forgot everything." Victor let out a growl, a terrible sound filled with rage. He dropped to his knees in front of his daughter and hugged her. Then over her head he looked at Olivia. There was no doubt left in his eyes anymore. A cold fire of vengeance was burning there. "Today I'm calling in every favor I have," he said firmly. "We'll find them. There will be justice. I promise." Olivia nodded. For the first time in 4 years, she wasn't alone. Victor's office smelled of ozone and burned paper. Outside, a storm was raging. Rare for October, vicious, with heavy rolls of thunder. Victor never let go of the phone. "I don't care what it costs, Glenn," he said in a low voice that sounded like grinding metal. "Pull the Highway Patrol archives from '96. Find everyone who was on duty that day. Buy them, scare them, shake their souls out of them. But I want names." Olivia sat by the fireplace. Kate was asleep in her lap. The little girl twitched in her sleep, and Olivia automatically stroked her pale hair. That warmth was the only thing keeping her from falling into a black pit. Victor slammed the receiver down. "My people are working on it. Glenn's a former investigator. He can find anyone." The door opened soundlessly. A solidly built man with sharp, watchful eyes walked in, Glenn himself. In his hands was a folder and a rolled-up sheet of paper. With him came a thin man in glasses carrying an artist's case. "We put together a sketch of the suspect," Glenn said, unrolling the sheet. From the white paper stared the face of a beast. The artist had captured not only the features but the expression, too. A mixture of stupidity, cruelty, and total impunity. Deep-set eyes, a fleshy nose, and a long, ragged scar cutting across the left cheek from the cheekbone to the chin. "Him?" Victor asked, looking at Olivia. That scar had haunted her dreams for 4 years. "Him," she breathed. "We ran the image through the databases," Glenn said, pulling a glossy photograph from the folder. It showed the same man, in an expensive suit, holding a champagne glass, smiling into the camera. "Edward Burton," Victor read, and his voice turned frightening. "Nickname Butch. In the 90s, he was part of an organized crime group, extortion, car theft, protection rackets." "And now?" Olivia asked, feeling cold fury begin to boil inside her. "And now," Glenn said with a grimace, "he's a respected businessman, owner of a nightclub and a chain of auto repair shops, running for city council, philanthropist, charity donor." Olivia let out a bitter laugh, dry, sharp, almost like a bark. "He killed Andrew. He poured vodka down my throat while my husband was dying. And now he wants to be elected." "Not anymore," Victor said, slowly crushing the composite sketch in his fist. And he never will be. He rose abruptly, his face flushing dark red, his hand instinctively jerking toward his chest. Olivia carefully moved the sleeping Kate onto the couch and walked over to him. "Easy," she said, touching his shoulder. "Your heart. Have mercy on it. It's been through enough already." Victor looked at her. A fire was raging in his eyes. "It doesn't hurt, Olivia. It wants justice. I can feel it." "Andrew wasn't a killer," she said firmly, looking him straight in the eye. "He was the kindest man in the world. If you kill Burton, you'll become just like him, and Andrew's heart won't survive that kind of filth." Her words got through to him. Victor exhaled, and his shoulders dropped. "All right. I won't kill him, but I will destroy him. Glenn, we're going to his club. I already spoke to the Attorney General." "I'm coming with you," Olivia said. She wasn't asking. She was stating it. "It's dangerous. He has security." "I'm a witness. Without me, there's no official identification." There was steel in her voice, forged in prison barracks. Victor was silent for a second, then nodded. "Glenn, get her a coat and glasses." The Mirage Club glowed with neon in the center of the city like a poisonous flower. Expensive cars were lined up outside. Victor's black armored G-Wagon pulled to a stop right at the entrance, ignoring the line. Glenn showed his badge, and the doors swung open. Inside, the music was pounding. The bass hit like fists in the chest. The air smelled of tobacco, expensive perfume, and grilled meat. Laser beams flashed through the dimness. Olivia walked beside Victor, gripping his elbow tightly. She could feel the beats of his heart beneath the fabric of his jacket. Thump, 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 calm, powerful. As if Andrew were right there beside her saying, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." "There he is," Glenn whispered. "In the VIP booth." Up in the half-dark on a raised platform sat Burton. His bald head shone in the light of the spotlights. The scar had turned bluish from all the drinking. He was sprawled in an armchair, one arm around a girl in a glittering dress, a cigar in the other hand, laughing with that exact laugh Olivia had heard in her nightmares. Burton's security blocked their way. "Private area." "I'm Palmer," Victor said quietly. "Tell your boss I came to collect a debt." The guard's face changed. He muttered something into his radio. Burton, up above, narrowed his eyes, then lazily waved a hand. "Let them through." They went up. "Victor Palmer." Burton didn't get up. He only lifted his glass in greeting. "What an honor. You look pretty lively for a heart patient." Victor walked up to the table and slowly pulled a photograph from his pocket, the one with little Kate in the black Jeep, and threw it onto the table, right into Burton's plate. "How was the ride in my car, back in '96? The smile slid off Burton's face. Animal fear flashed in his eyes. "What the hell are you talking about? What car? I don't know you." "You do," Olivia cut in. She took off her dark glasses. "And you know me, too." "Look carefully." Burton lifted his eyes to her. First confusion, then recognition. "You don't forget something like that." "You're supposed to be in prison," he said, his voice shaking. "You got 7 years. I got out, and you're going in for a long time. Life." Burton jumped to his feet. "Security! Get them out!" But nobody moved. Behind Burton's guards, men in masks and carrying rifles had already appeared. Victor hadn't come just to talk. He had brought the law, the kind you couldn't buy. "Too late, Burton," Victor said. "Your connections don't work anymore. I met with the Attorney General today. He was very interested in child abduction and double homicide. Oh, and the drugs your people are selling in this club, too?" Burton looked around wildly. Realizing there was nowhere to run, he bared his teeth, and the polished businessman peeled away, revealing the same thug from the highway underneath. "You can't prove a damn thing. The car's gone. There are no witnesses. Who's gonna believe her? And you'll be dead soon anyway, heart patient." Victor threw his cane aside. His hand shot forward and grabbed Burton by the throat. He slammed him back into the chair and leaned right into his face. "There is a witness, the most important one." He struck his own chest with his free hand. "Hear that? Thump, thump. That's Andrew, this woman's husband, the man you killed. His heart gives me strength." Burton's eyes bulged out of his head. He choked, trying to pry Victor's fingers loose. "Victor!" Olivia cried. "Let him go, don't!" She wasn't afraid for Burton. Victor's face had gone dark red and a vein had swollen at his temple. Andrew's heart might not hold. "Victor, for Katie, for Andrew." She grabbed his arm. He froze. He looked at Olivia through a clouded gaze and slowly loosened his fingers. Burton slid to the floor, coughing. "Take him," Victor told the men who had stepped forward. "I need him alive for trial." As Burton, twisted into handcuffs, was dragged toward the exit, he turned and shouted, "You don't know who I worked for. They won't forgive this." "Your accomplices already gave up everyone the second they saw the recording," Glenn answered calmly. When the room had emptied out and the music was turned off, Victor lowered himself heavily onto a couch. He looked completely drained. "Water?" he asked. Olivia handed him the glass. Her hands were trembling too. "How are you?" "Alive." Victor gave a faint smile. It held up. He rubbed his chest. "You know, Olivia, I think it feels better. The burning is gone." Olivia sat down beside him. She was no longer afraid of this man's closeness. "Of course it's gone," she said softly. "Andrew could never stand unfinished business." "There's still one thing left to do," Victor said, looking at her seriously. "The most important thing. Give you back your good name." They walked out of the club into pouring rain. But now that rain didn't feel cold to Olivia. It was washing the dirt of the past away. Victor opened the car door for her. "Let's go home. Katie's waiting." "Home," she repeated, testing the word on her tongue. For the first time in 4 years, it didn't sound like a lie. They drove through the city at night. Olivia watched the streetlights sliding by. In the rearview mirror, she could see Victor's eyes. He was looking at her with tenderness and gratitude. And suddenly, she understood. Andrew's heart hadn't just saved this man's life. It had led him to her, to save her too. But the hardest test was still ahead, facing the past head on. April 2002 swept into the city with the smell of wet asphalt and swelling buds. The snow was living out its last days in the shadows of fences, and the sun was already warm enough to make you want to unbutton your coat. For Olivia, this spring became the first real spring she had had in 5 years. The trial had ended a week earlier. It was nothing like that swift, merciless trial in 1997, when people had looked at her like she was dirt. This time, the courtroom was packed with reporters. Edward Burton, gray-faced and gaunt at the defense table, kept hiding his face from the camera flashes. He got life. His accomplices got 20 years each in maximum security. When the judge read out the acquittal, Victor held Olivia's hand. His palm was hot and dry. Fully exonerated. Official apologies to be issued. Compensation to be paid. Olivia didn't hear the numbers. All she heard was the crash of invisible bars falling away from around her soul. But the most terrifying thing still remained, the one thing money and connections couldn't fix. "We have to go see her," Olivia said, staring out the car window. They were driving through the old neighborhood she knew so painfully well. Apartment blocks, narrow courtyards, laundry hanging on clotheslines. Her youth had passed here. Here she had been happy with Andrew. "Are you sure she'll let us in?" Victor drove carefully, steering around the spring potholes. "I don't know. The last time I saw her, she spat in my face in the courtroom. She screamed, 'May you be cursed.' She didn't know the truth. Truth is hard to accept when you've lived on hatred for 5 years." They stopped in front of an old 5-story walk-up. The entryway was dark, smelling of cats and fried food. Olivia climbed to the third floor, and every step felt heavy. The door. Olivia pressed the bell. Shuffling footsteps came from inside. The lock clicked. The door cracked open on the chain. A face appeared in the gap. Old, lined with wrinkles. Eyes faded by tears looked out suspiciously. Dorothy, Andrew's mother. She had aged an eternity. "Who is it?" "It's me, Mom," Olivia said softly. The old woman froze. Horror flashed in her eyes, mixed with rage. "You? Murderer! Get out of here!" She tried to slam the door, but Victor calmly and firmly planted his shoe in the way. "Dorothy, listen to us," he said in his deep, steady voice. "Olivia is innocent. The court cleared her. The real killers were found. I don't care about your courts. She killed him. Get out, witch!" Olivia stood there with her head lowered. Every word landed like a lash. "Let us in," Victor said firmly, pushing the door harder. "I brought your son to you." The old woman froze. Silence filled the hallway. "What kind of nonsense are you talking? My son is in the ground. 5 years now." "His body is, yes," Victor said, looking straight into her eyes. "But his heart is alive. And it's standing in front of you right now." Dorothy loosened her grip. The door opened wider. She looked at Victor like he was crazy, but in her eyes a spark of wild hope flickered. "Come in," she muttered, and shuffled deeper into the apartment in her slippers. The apartment smelled of dust and old things. Everywhere there were pictures of Andrew, in school, in the army, at his wedding to Olivia. On the wedding photo, Olivia's face had been carefully blacked out with marker. Victor took off his coat and stayed in his light shirt. Dorothy sat down on the couch, clasping her dry, knotted fingers together. "Well, talk. But if you lie to me, I'll curse you. I've got nothing left to lose." And Olivia began to speak. She told her everything. About that day, about Burton, about prison, about how she had survived only for Andrew's memory. Then Victor spoke. He told her about his illness, about receiving the heart of a young man who had died after a crash. "I pulled the records, Dorothy." He took papers from a folder. "Here's the summary from my medical file. Here's your son's autopsy report. The time of death and the time the organ was recovered match down to the minute. Blood type, rare phenotype. It all matches." The old woman took the papers. Her hands were shaking so badly the pages trembled. She didn't read them. She only stared at the stamps and seals. Then she lifted her eyes to Victor. They were full of tears. "So he's in there?" she asked, pointing a bent finger at his chest. "Yes," Victor nodded. "He saved my life, and because of him I found Olivia. He saved all of us." Dorothy rose slowly. She walked over to Victor, tiny, barely reaching his shoulder. "Can I?" she asked, sounding suddenly like a child. Victor silently unbuttoned his shirt, exposing the scarred chest beneath. The old woman pressed her ear to his chest. She went still, clutching his shoulders like a drowning person clutching a life ring. In the silence of the old apartment, a strong, steady rhythm sounded. Thump, thump, thump. It was a rhythm only a mother could know, the rhythm of life she had once given, and that had gone on in defiance of death. Dorothy's shoulders started to shake. A howl tore out of her throat, terrible and cleansing, like the cry of a wounded creature as a thorn is pulled from its flesh. "Andrew, my son, my baby." Victor wrapped his arms around her, stroking her gray head. He was crying with her, and Olivia, standing by the door, was crying too, feeling the pain leave her. "Forgive me, sweetheart," the old woman said suddenly, pulling back and looking at Olivia with tear-filled eyes. "Forgive this old fool. Grief blinded me. I thought you killed him, and you were suffering too." Olivia rushed to her, dropped to her knees, and buried her face in the rough wool scarf. "I don't blame you, Mom. I understand everything." The three of them drove to the cemetery together. The day had cleared. The sun was blinding in the puddles. Rooks were crying out in the tall birches. Life was triumphing over death. Andrew's grave was well kept, but somber. Black granite, severe lettering. Dorothy laid flowers on the stone. "Well, son," she said, stroking the grave marker, "you've got visitors. Your wife came back to you, and you came too." Victor stood beside her with his hat off. The wind stirred his graying hair. He felt a strange peace. For the first time in all those years, the heart wasn't aching, wasn't yearning. It was home. It had fulfilled its duty. Olivia stepped up beside Victor. They stood at the grave, a strange family, broken and put back together again. A former prisoner, a wealthy businessman with another man's heart, an old mother. Tragedy had bound them, but love had brought them together. Victor looked at Olivia. In the sunlight, she seemed younger. The prison grayness was fading from her face, giving way to that soft beauty Andrew had loved so much. "Olivia," he said quietly, "I know it may be too soon to say this, but I don't want to waste any more time. Life is too short." He took her hand. "Be with me, be with us. I can't replace Andrew for you, but I promise I'll love you enough for both of us, for myself and for him." Olivia looked at the headstone. Andrew was smiling at her from the photo, openly, brightly. It almost felt like he was winking at her, saying, "What are you waiting for? Live." She looked back at Victor, at his chest, where that familiar heart was beating beneath his shirt. "I will," she whispered. A year later, music was sounding through the big house again. Olivia sat at the grand piano, her fingers running lightly across the keys. On the rug by the fireplace, Victor was building a tower out of blocks with Katie. Red-haired Buddy, the puppy who had grown into a huge, shaggy dog, watched them lazily while chewing on a rubber bone. "Mom, look!" Katie shouted when the tower reached a dizzying height. "Taller than Dad!" Olivia smiled without stopping her playing. The word "mom" had hurt her ears at first, but now it had become the sweetest sound in the world. She had officially adopted Katie 6 months earlier, after a small, quiet wedding. Dorothy was dozing in the rocking chair. Now she came to stay with them often, sometimes for a week at a time. She said this was the only house where she slept peacefully, because here she could hear her son's heart beating. Victor lifted his head and met Olivia's eyes. There was so much warmth in his gaze, it could have kept someone warm through the cruelest winter. He pressed a hand to his chest and gave her a small nod. "Everything's okay? We're alive. We remember." Olivia struck the final chord. The sound hung in the air, pure and bright, then rose upward to the high ceiling, and higher still into the endless sky where there is no pain, no prisons, no death. There is only love, which never stops being. Dear viewers, were you moved by Olivia and Victor's story? Do you believe love can overcome even death, and that a heart can remember and love even in another chest? Write in the comments what you would have done in their place. And if this story made your heart beat a little faster, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. That's the best reward an author can get. See you in the next stories.